Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Fourth Estate. Charles Mongu Shampagi. It's budget week and we'll be discussing the alignment of the priorities for this budget to the economic situation that the country is in. Some just bit of background. For the last 6 years, the economy has not been performing well. Actually, we are performing at almost less than half of what we performed in, how the country performed in the budget for 2009-2010. I think that's the last time we posted a 9.7 growth rate. The rest, the subsequent year was 4.4, and right now as we speak, the projections are 3.9 going down towards 3.5 performance of the economy. What needs to be done? I know this is a subject that's been discussed extensively over the last 1 week. Most of the talk shows, including the on the spot in the studios. Somewhere early in the week on Tuesday, and then after that we'll have the presentation of the budget, which technically has already been passed by Parliament. So what will be happening will be a ritualistic presentation to the nation through Parliament. What does that mean? Let me introduce the panel that I have to discuss whether the alignment of the priorities, whether we're putting the money where we need to put it, and whether this budget can actually revamp an economy that is struggling the way the Ugandan economy is struggling. Starting with, from the extreme right, I have extreme left, because my right is on this side. I need to look at my hand before I can define whether I'm on where my right is from my left.
We are glad you're not presenting the budget.
On a piece of Corporate Affairs Director of Nile Breweries, AB InBev.
Good evening, Charles, and good evening, panel.
Angelo Izama is a journalist, doesn't need a lot more introduction. He's almost part of this show, though he keeps going away and coming back. Angelo, very nice to have you.
Thanks for having me, Charles.
Sanjay Tana is a former member of parliament. He's also a businessman.
Good evening to you all out there, and thank you for having me on this panel. Henry
Nixon Ogwal is the Director of Fundraising at Action Aid International, Uganda. Nixon, very nice to have you.
Good evening, Charles, panel and viewers.
I was thinking to myself earlier that because you have three names, like I do, I'm going to be mixing between Henry and Nixon at some stage, but we'll have them going side by side. Let me start with Donapito and ask, you've looked at the budget that was passed by Parliament this last week. We're talking about 29 trillion shillings that we have to, the minister has to spend this year. Two major questions. Where is the money coming from? How does it boost more money being created in this economy?
Well, going by what the minister has said, it's almost a 50-50 between taxation and non-government revenue, so to say. So, as to whether it will all come in, I think we are now used to that story. There will always be shortfalls there, so it's nothing new. And the second question?
My second question is to you is, where does the money come from? Because this is the projection, but where does it come from? Looking at where the minister will be telling us he intends to get his money from to collect it. You brew beer, you sell beer. I don't know whether you are having, whether the taxes are remaining the same for you or they are going to increase.
No, there has been quite a number of tax changes, so I'm sure. And I think in the budget framework paper, they basically say that the emphasis is going to be on efficiency. So UR, of course, is going to come, unfortunately for the usual suspects like us. I think there has been some tinkering in terms of the tax rates, so they will be able to get a little bit more money. And of course, if the growth resumes and demand increases, then they should be able to get more money.
Angelo, what kind of budgeting is required for a time like this, for a country like Uganda?
Well, at the onset of the economic slowdown, me and a couple of friends, in fact, I think I wrote about it, recommended belt tightening. What is the technical term for it? But anyway, it's really a time to scale down on your wasteful areas and tighten your belt in all areas, because the economic slowdown, which is partly not of our making, started with the financial crash and then the global economic slowdown. We are still really in the thick of it. Many countries suffered, some worse than we did. For example, Greece. But the kind of politics of Uganda, unfortunately, as I've pointed out, has instead created new areas for wasteful expenditure. We are living way beyond our means, Charles. Like I told you last week, if you look at the last 3 election cycles, the government gets elected, and the politics of patronage impairs its ability to govern. In 2006, it took 2 years for the government to get its act together. In 2011, it took 3 years for the government to get its act together before it got into campaigning. This time, I think there will just be no governing, but campaigning all through to 2021. These inflationary pressures that come from politics is because money is being spent on politics. We have a top-heavy government. The government is very big. The politics of the government require handouts, to maintain support. We have crippled the ability of the civil service to do whatever they call it, service delivery. And I think these are the things that the minister may announce his numbers, but unless you have the means to generate wealth, in particular in our case create jobs, you cannot do much.
Tana, you're a member of parliament, you're a businessman now. We saw you, we looked at you not as a politician but as a business person, where you are now. What kind of budget works for the business community?
Angelo, I want to agree with what
what is the austerity budget? I think
yes.
That's what we need.
I want to agree with what Angelo has just said, but I don't want to continue painting the grim picture that both Ona and Angelo are trying to take this show towards.
I deal in a product which brings happiness. So I've never seen the grim picture.
Yeah, but your presentation was we know what happens, etc. Charles, I liked the way you presented the topic on today's show. And you said that at one point we were flying with growth rates of 9.6, 9.8%. Now we are sitting at 4%, probably we'll end up at 3.9 or 3.8. Japan has been sitting at 0 rate or 0.5, and now they are predicting 1% for the last 12 years. USA has less than 2%. China just recently downgraded their growth predictions from 6 to about 4 point something. We know. So what I want to say, and I agree with Angelo, is that this meltdown started in 2007. Some economies are feeling it today, like the East African or East and Central African economies are feeling the heat of that meltdown in the global economy. He mentioned Greece, but it's not Greece alone. Italy is on the brink of collapse. There is a huge problem with several of the European economies. UK, after this election and after the complete Brexit, will be a totally different story in terms of economy. So we must understand, like Ona said, part of our budget has been funded by alternative sources. Those alternative sources are these friends of ours. Now they themselves are in trouble. USA is in trouble. Europe is in trouble. So how much more can we expect from them? If you look at what we have managed to do as a country from 1986...
Let me just cut you short there. Do you realize that you're not answering my question? You're giving me a political explanation. I said, what kind of budget works for you as a business person?
I am coming to
yes.
that. I need to build. So what we have managed to do as a country, as a nation, is become self-sufficient to an extent of about 70-75% of our budget. This particular budget and what Angelo said, and that's why I started from where Angelo stopped, is that we need an austerity budget. We need to cut any business, even though you start from a family setting. If you have a limited income, then you must budget and spend within that income. If as a country we are seeing that we are not going to be able to generate so much, we should be able to cut certain expenditure. And what baffles me, Charles, is that we are so good at budgeting. I think we are very, very good, in my own opinion. We have very good economists as a country. But last budgetary performance, the analysts have put out the data. Almost 16 trillion unabsorbed. You budget for the money, you put aside the money, the road sector, power sector, all these sectors, the money is there, it's not being absorbed. The government is building domestic debt. So I would have wanted these aspects to have been addressed in the budget for it to work for us, the local businessmen. Because without government, which is the largest spender, spending money, and actually, instead rather than paying us, they are increasing domestic debt. If anybody out there is listening to me, if I was in their shoes, I would have issued bonds, international bonds, brought in money, and paid the local businessmen so that the money is in circulation. They are sucking the money out of circulation, killing businesses, and the foreign banks that operate in Uganda, because we have no national bank. And the only bank that kind of lent money to the locals was shut down recently.
It wasn't shut down. It was
taken
absorbed
over
by another bank.
Absolutely. So you had most of the local traders complaining. So the problem is that we do not have money in circulation because of government policy of using the domestic debt as a source of funding of this budget. So I would have really wanted an amendment on that. But if we don't get money, how will we pass on the money?
Okay, Nixon. If the economy has been struggling, I hear what Tana is saying, but the current performance rate is about 3.9%. The projections are actually worse. It might drop to 3.5% for this coming year, though there is hope that it will pick up. The country has been beset by two major things. One, it remains a highly agro-based economy, but you had a serious drought whose impact hasn't been felt yet. In economic terms, people were starving, but in terms of how it affects food availability and people's ability to work and make more money. Number two, you had the fall armyworm, and then you had an invasion of a locust in Bundubujo the other day. If you look at the prioritization of this budget and where we're coming from, to many people it appears like business as usual. You have a ritual. Every year government is supposed to present a budget. So you expect they will present a budget. But whether that budget actually jolts the economy into some kind of rethinking, give it new life. Do you see this budget delivering that, and what needs to be done to get the budget to deliver?
It is very unfortunate that business is being taken as usual in unusual environment for this budget. It's very painful, a fact that the economy is not doing well, and it is for about 4 or 5 years, though we have been using the underlying projections which had better outlook, and therefore it created a kind of expenditure and consumption pattern of government that is not sustainable. And we are only beginning to feel the impact and the momentum of that behavior in the expenditure pattern. It is actually not true that probably in the next few years this is going to become better. The impact of that consumption pattern is going to draw this economy to a more tighter corner if we don't wake up. To get back to your question squarely, our economy is still really so much reliant on the performance on extractive level. We're talking about primary things like agriculture. And yet, our prioritization of looking at the obstacles to agriculture is very little. We have suffered a number of issues that you have just mentioned, but we don't see them being clearly identified and addressed as priorities in the budget. In fact, the budget for agriculture has even gone down.
3.9%, I think, from 5.4% last year.
Yes, and it's in the environment where we have had delayed rains. Most of the crops have died, and therefore we are expecting the food prices even to become higher. There's going to be more food insufficiency in the economy, and that affects even a number of agro-based industries, including the owners. They might actually suffer even more. So what we would have expected is to really cut down on the not immediately productive sectors. While the infrastructure investment is good in the long term, but we must also look at its immediate and medium term impact onto the economy. Unfortunately, we already have big infrastructural projects that we have already committed to. And this has got long-term drain onto available resources that we had not. Our economies, while you're saying they are very smart, which I know they are, but a comprehensive analysis of the impact of the infrastructure onto the overall economic functioning under this environment was not well done. So we have already committed most of that money. And because we have already committed, we are even suffering on how to really deliver services. When you look at
utilize that infrastructure. Let me just add to a small point for his benefit.
I want you to hold that addition until after a very short commercial break. We will come back to this discussion in a moment. And another question, how do you enforce an austerity budget, given our history? Tanda says we've been doing very well for the last so many years. We have very smart economists. I do not know how you align allocative efficiency with actual expenditure, actual implementation. If you're going to rely on supplementary budget year in, year out. After a short commercial break, we'll be right back. Welcome back to this edition of the Fourth Estate. It's budget week, so we'll be discussing the budget which will be presented to the nation on Thursday. But the budget, it's already been passed by Parliament. The ritual in the East African community is that all the budgets of the community are presented at the same time. But Kenya presented theirs earlier because they have an election coming up in August, so they wanted to present theirs earlier. But Tanzania, I think Rwanda will also be presenting their budgets very soon. One of our viewers is complaining about the mano on the Fourth Estate, but unfortunately, it's like that. We don't have ladies on the show tonight, and sometimes we'll keep trying to address that maybe some other time. But Angelo, you wanted to interject just
Nixon Ogwal made the point that some of the investments we are making will not, let me translate into jobs or productivity that the economy needs. But I wanted to tell him that I actually posted recently projections in the electricity sector. The regulatory authority did issued its new outlook for the next 10 years. And they said, well, you know, demand for electricity is actually going to slow down. And their view is that this large hydropower projects that's going to bring a lot of megawatts in the next 10 years will simply not be sustainable. So they were suggesting to the government that look for ways of exporting this power because you won't be able to use it, but also if you can't delay. But they did also point out on the question of allocative efficiency that part of the reason demand is depressed for electricity in Uganda is because the electricity grid is too small. And the electricity grid is too small is because we don't have a very good deal in distribution. investment by Umeme in distribution will constantly remain stunted because it's expensive money to put in there. And we have suggested to this government that one creative way of thinking about creating jobs is to invest in expanding that grid with government funds, not through a private sector company like Umeme.
Does the government have the money?
So that's the thing. According to the regulator, in the next 10 years, we need about $1.27 billion to expand this grid, concurrently with the coming into force of Karuma and Simba.
Yeah, Charles, for me, look, I think the viewer out there is watching, and many of them are stressed like most of us in the studio, except maybe Honorable Tan, who is a top-post businessman.
Except
people have just sent kids.
We have just
sent kids to school for second term, and the fees were going through the roof, and I'm sure the term will be so short that you don't want it to end, and you worry about third-term school fees. A lot of young people are worried about jobs. So the budget can be as complex. We can say we have great economies, but how do you explain to that person who is unable to get a job, who feels their income is too little to keep them through the month, and they have a lot of dependents calling from the village, they need support? I mean, that is the crisis. And I think the budget needs to really start being basic. First of all, in my view, most of the money in the budget is about sustaining a bureaucracy that for years pretends to work, and the government, of course, pretends to pay. I was joking with one of the civil servants who said, how can they transform the economy from subsistence when they are earning subsistence salary? Can they change the economy to commercial when they are not earning commercial salaries?
If you'd allow me to cut in there, Honor, one of the major proposals in the budget that will be presented is setting a minimum wage at 130,000 Uganda shillings.
Which is an insult almost.
An insult to all, but is that even enforceable? Because most domestic
workers
who are rated at the bottom rank earn about 50 to 70,000 shillings.
Yeah, it's not enforceable. It depends on whom you are working for. Certainly, if someone is earning more as an owner of a business, why would he pay you little money? But if he's earning almost nothing, he can pay you as much as 136,000. But of course, there are cases where people are genuinely exploited by people who perhaps can pay them better, but they take advantage of their vulnerable situation and not pay them. So for me, the budget at the end of the day has come and gone for so many years, but there is always no clear linkage between last year's budget and even so many years back and what the money did. And if Honorable Turner says 16 trillion was unspent, how can you then go and pad a ministry with even more money when it did not do as much as it was supposed to do? We never hear of money being cut.
You know the system, Honor. You've been in Parliament as well. Whatever monies are not absorbed come back to the consolidated fund by the.
So why are they
so to me,
why should you
that's
the
what
ministry which
that
money?
exactly.
No, you need to close the ministry.
So Honor, that's what I want.
And
that's what I want to say.
More.
That to answer what Charles is saying and what Nixon has said, that this particular budget, in my own view, leaves a lot to be desired. Three things, like Angelo said. Number one, austerity. We should have seen cut in fuel expenditure by government departments, telecom the so-called conferences, that the tours that they have outside, the flights, etc. We should have seen cut in spending, actual spending by government. We should fight this system of where we come back to Parliament for supplementary budget, like he said just before the break. I remember while I was in Parliament, there was an emergency where mad cow disease broke out, and we were called from recess to pass monies for vaccines which had not been budgeted for Ministry of Agriculture. Such emergencies are good enough, where it's a national mad cow disease was threatening take away cows and human lives.
But Honorable Sana,
So-
the point is, you are saying cut and do what with the money? I think that's the bigger
Yes,
question for me.
that is what
Even if
my
you stop
second point.
expenditure
My second point
and you have
is
money lying idle,
my second
and
point
the country
is
not benefiting.
to
So the
kickstart.
point is, you need to change after cutting this money. Do not give it to the same system. That
No, we
is
don't
not
have another
utilizing it.
system. We can't do.
There are
if
people
there
like
is no
you who are
wishful
private
thinking.
business who can
True,
deliver.
and that is what I want to say. My second point, Charles, is that I have suggested through various fora, including my Facebook page, some few months back, the media reported that the government was trying to do a bailout. But the list of those bailout, the companies that they wanted to bail out, was the usual people in Kampala.
The usual suspects.
I don't want to call them suspects, but the usual team within Kampala here. What I suggested then in my response on my Facebook page was that if at all, through the monitoring department in Bank of Uganda, we got 10 traders in each town. In Arua you pick 10, in Gulu you pick 10, in Lira, in Soroti, in Jinja, in Tororo, in Kitgum, in Fort Portal, in Barara, and each of those 10 businessmen, top 10 businessmen
Or women.
or companies are given X amount of money. Then today, if you open any newspaper, open on page towards the end, you will see properties being auctioned. And I said this on the floor of Parliament 4 years ago, Charles, that if at all we do not control interest rates of these banks, and the way they are increasing interest rates at will without being controlled, we are going to have this scenario, and we are there. These so-called banks serve other people's interests and not Uganda's interests. We don't have a local bank.
Banks.
So to me, the financial market needs to be regulated. That's my third point. We need to come out with bailout packages, small ones. They could be in the range of 50 to 100 million per company. Small, but let it go rural. Let us stop giving billions to individuals in Kampala, like some time back
usual
while I was
suspects.
in Parliament, the same usual suspect, 6 billion, 10 billion. Yesterday, but one, there was a list in the newspapers showing that government has paid taxes for the same group of
77 billion shillings.
You know, now if you give me 77 today, and I divide it in 70 different companies in Uganda, do you know what that would do to employment in the rural area? Do you know what that would do to productivity, to collection of taxes?
Okay, that brings me to the question I wanted to raise. Angelo, we've reported and covered and debated budgets every year. Year on year, we spend weeks or discussing the budget. Even now, we're discussing the budget. It will be the discussion on every talk show. For the next one, we can see it's presented
Business
next week.
reporters will be waiting for their card to the budget breakfast.
Exactly. I've been looking for my card from Chris Obore. He hasn't sent it yet. But the question is,
Your ritual, you know.
can we stand on any individual budget and say this budget was intended to cure this particular challenge in the economy, and then look back at its performance at the end of the year, like Ona was asking, budget performance, and say this budget intended to cure this particular anomaly, and it succeeded, before you go into the next budget?
So in 2007, we had a disagreement with the president and his people, because he was of the view that the economic slowdown 2007-2008 would not affect us that much, and he made a public statement to that effect. For us, we were actually quite worried, and we suggested that the government needed to run a war room. You know what a war room is? Where you have these screens, and like Sanjay says, basically a war room would have every single project that the government is spending money on, and track it almost month to month for what it is creating in terms of jobs. But the government's priorities are not the economic crisis, they are the political crisis. That is why this government spends so much time on securing the peace politically, they're not that much interested in economy. A lot of the money that they spend in the guise of working to deliver services are really projects that provide political security and certainty for the government. That's why the businessmen who are part of the Center of State Business Relations tend to be the same. They just funnel this money. I think it's really, a government official I heard from a friend described it as a Ponzi scheme. This government runs really essentially a financial Ponzi scheme. And as long as they put the politics ahead of the real economy, and they're not pressured to create jobs in the way that any jobs are created, like you said, with practical projects, there's very little that this ritual will accomplish.
Actually,
yes.
The biggest problem of this economy is that we are not directly financing production and productivity. Because if you look at it, get to agriculture, that employs over 80% of our people. And then we ignore it that much. You know, agriculture has actually been, agricultural sector has been declining year in, year out. And yet, by the way, as it is squeezing and becoming smaller, it is what is actually feeding us all. It is even what is feeding most of the factories. But we are not actually doing any. So we are not funding productivity and the basis upon which.
How do you mean when most of the biggest government projects we've had over the last few years have focused on agriculture? From the Plan for Modernization of Agriculture, which is almost 20 years old, 30 years old now?
It's a giant bureaucracy.
Yes.
Now,
from Plan for Modernization of Agriculture to Operation Wealth Creation.
And nods in between.
you see,
Yes, nods in between.
yes, thank you very much. If you talk about Plan for Modernization of Agriculture, it had how many pillars? 6. Only one of the 6 pillars tried to be focused on, and that is what is called NADS. Where have all the other 5 gone? If we were to actually say we learn as a country, we don't actually learn. Now, that's why extension has completely almost died. So, we are not supporting.
It was privatized, it didn't die.
Now, if it is privatized, those private people that are running it are actually some small businessmen that wait a minute, let me give a case. If you now go to the people who are selling these agricultural inputs, some very complicated chemicals, they themselves even don't know what they are. And those are the people we are relying on. And so what I would want to say is
fake fertilizer, fake seed.
We need to focus on supporting production. Secondly, I agree with the other 3. There is a lot of inefficiency, including also some elements of internal allocation efficiency in agriculture alone also. Even also money within agriculture is not in the right place. I think we need to very significantly invest into agricultural infrastructure, especially we need to handle large-scale irrigation in this country.
Agriculture. I've had this cry for funding for agriculture, but again, ask a simple question: if you follow this money, how much does it actually produce a crop or raise a cow? I see much of the production is being done by private individuals. There is hardly anything that government can take direct credit for. So when you give money to the Ministry of Agriculture, apart from running workshops and endless research, which, I mean, what is the direct relation between a Ministry of Agriculture budget and productivity on the farm? I would go with Honorable position. Get some of that money and give to farmers who are actually doing something, and let them account for it. Let them produce.
Let me flip that same question. Isn't that what we've been doing? When the president has been moving around, camping in Luero, camping in Mayuge, camping where, he has model farms in
But I've just added at the end of my sentence, let them account for it. I don't know whether they account for it.
Honorable Sana, you're questioning something. Just to come in, you're questioning something about that. I think Nixon raised it. One of the biggest challenges to agriculture, one of the hugest costs to farmers, private people trying to make something that keeps this country going, is that you incur a double, triple cost buying fake implements, fake medicines. Yes. Ask anybody watching us.
Anybody
watching us.
None other than the president has complained about acaricides.
Yes.
Becoming
Honorable Sana.
Let me respond. You people are not allowing me to talk. Charles, I don't want to say that it is non-existent in the market. But proportionately, Uganda's problem in agricultural production is not the fake pesticides or the fake seeds you are talking about. It is not at all. Percentage-wise, I'm talking about proportionate. Our biggest problem is route to market. You have crops that are not harvested properly, they are not stored, they are not transported, and worst of all, why we have the Nixons and the owners of this world sitting here and criticizing government is because government has failed to collect those statistics. If we can all drive now to Busia and you just sit at the border and you count the number of lorries crossing Busia going into Kenya with all kinds of fruits, all kinds of crops, cereals, matoke, you go to the Nimule border and you sit and you count. We do not have statistics in either Ministry of Finance, UBOS, all that productivity.
Angela knows where those statistics are.
I want to tell you, I know for a fact because I've tried to raise, I've written quite a number of letters to all the various departments. Our problem is that, by the way, if you look at history, if today the president...
we are overproducing?
Just a minute. That's what I want to tell you. If today you announce that I'm putting up a tomato factory, a processing factory, you say you want 100,000 tons, they have capacity within 2 or 3 years to give you more than what your capacity is.
When did you last speak to General Saleh and his tomato factory in Luwero?
That's what I want to tell you. They closed because they failed to get market for the finished product.
Oh, really?
Yes. Like maize now. If you go and you see the amount of maize which was sold to Kenya that has led to this drought and famine. In Teso, owner knows, you know for a fact, historically, this man knows, in northern Uganda, our forefathers, when I used to go to the villages with my father to buy produce, there were 2 granaries. One for the family, one belonged to the chief. And you were not allowed to touch the second granary without authorization from the chief. Today they even sell the soil in the compound and get cash for everything. So there was that element.
How did you arrive at that?
That element.
No, how did you arrive at that?
Monetization of
no,
the economy.
it wasn't monetization.
No, we have no savings.
And was that monetization kind of government encouraged, policy encouraged?
No.
Or was it natural?
No, the other one was not enforced. Because of liberalization, we forgot of, and that's what we are talking about, going back to the roots. Creating austerity budget. Now that was first saving. It was saving in kind. Now we are trying to encourage people to save 100 shillings.
Let's take a break. Let's get back.
Let's take a break. Let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll pick up this discussion. We'll be right back. Welcome back to this last segment of the Fourth Estate. We'll be opening a phone line so that you can call in and share with us what you think about the budget 2017-2018, the alignment of priorities for the government, and whether you think that someone is stepping back and looking at the economy, doing a critical assessment of where it is, and determining where it should be headed. Because we've had a lot of explanations of projections, and then they fall short. And Tana was talking about allocative efficiency. What does allocative efficiency mean if it does not deliver you to where you want to go? Bernard Mpirwe from Ruvaga says, minimum wage will call for minimum salary if we are to be realistic. One can't pay a minimum wage when it's higher than his or her own salary. There is another viewer here sent quite a few messages. Says one, yes, he wanted to suggest that while making a budget, they should put in an allocation for thieves, because it is almost official in Uganda, so that the robbers do not encroach on the money that we have planned to do things for the government. So put in a provision and say this is for stealing, and let people steal. And then he says, seriously, about 6 billion is robbed every year, so why should it not be planned for early enough? The other point is that when you look at the rate at which businesses are closing operations in Uganda, then one must mourn for our country. This is why, where our neighbor Kenya is boasting of nearly 100% budget self-reliance, Uganda is about 40% relying on foreign aid and borrowed money. I agree with Honorable Tana on these banks for imperialists.
Oh dear.
Charles, just to wind up my point, you cut me short because of the ad. You see, as a nation, and that's my point, we have moved from point A to point, let's say, D or E. We want to go till Z. But then, in there, we should not forget the positives of where we are coming from. Like he said, we must learn the lessons while we prepare for the future. We've done well, in my own opinion, in terms of productivity. But route from harvesting, from harvest, post-harvest loss today, if properly quantified, in my own opinion, should be close to 25 to 30%. If you look at the way we are packaging our products for export, mainly regional market, it leaves a lot to be desired. Today we import wheat. We make flour here, but then it's exported to our neighboring countries. It's a huge market, and then we are starving our own market. Look at sugar, for example. Till 5 years ago, Uganda was a net importer of sugar. For the last 3-4 years, we have enough sugar to export. But we cannot regulate and say, as a country, we need so much, so you can only export so much. So my problem with the budget, because we are analyzing the budget is not providing, is not taking us that notch higher. We've been doing things correctly to a certain extent, but we need to, excuse me, we need to go that notch higher now, where we now start regulating to, first of all, satisfy our own needs before you go for export.
Okay.
So
Someone, let me just take a message from a viewer who says, he has questions about why my chair is different, and says, anyway, the point Tana is raising about data is crucial. We do not have data about how much each district produces, what are the leading commodities, who are the leading farmers, what are their needs, what are their capacities to manage finances, what is their land size and tenure, etc. If you have districts as service delivery points and not productive units, your plans and budgets will never address the common woman and man. This is Rama. Is this Rama? I think should be. Yeah, it should be Rama.
Tell us, why is your chair different?
A special chair.
A special chair. Yes.
Okay.
So
The big man.
No qualms about that.
No, Charles, I think there was things
let me just take this. Let me just take these two messages. Honor, if you could indulge me, let me just take these two messages. A listener here says, it's Moses Kisa, who's a regular on the panel here, says, a budget is not merely technocratic, it's fundamentally political. So it is possible to have a prudent budget. Is it possible to have a prudent budget under a broken political system? He has his opinion. Let me first sample the opinions on of the panel here.
No, look, I'll first go to completing the point raised by Rotana. I think they have insisted over and over. Is the role of government still valid in Africa, especially in a struggling economy? The way it has been perceived, that government actually has the capacity to fix problems. And we are 50 plus years down the road, and the results are there for everyone to see. So I think this budget should depart from really perpetuating this erroneous notion that government is going to fix problems. Because it has not, and it's not about to. people don't, I know the private sector has its weaknesses, it has been demonized, but I believe that let government concentrate on really regulation. Let's go back to agriculture. I thought Operations Wealth Creation, with armed people now involved, was going to be about creating standards in agricultural production. It is not enough to call farmers for a workshop and tell them what it means to produce a crop X well, and you don't follow to go to their farms to make sure that they are doing it. Even in the most developed countries, there is strict enforcement of agricultural practices. For example, if there is mad cow outbreak in your herd, just 2 cows are sick, they can destroy the entire herd because standards must be maintained. So these monies that is given to government departments should really be about going to make sure that guys who are actually doing the work are doing it well. What are their problems, especially in terms of things like taxation? There is a cry, yes, that we have a narrow tax base, but how much is government and even URA burdened that people who are engaged in a certain sector have a potential to increase their tax contribution if they were given this kind of tax concession?
Okay.
Until when the budget departs from being that government is going to do it, when it's not going to do it, I don't believe that we are going to go.
What's your answer to Moses Kisa?
Let me take Moses Kisa.
Of course, that is politics. That is politics. I mean, first of all, it has to be recognized that I know governments enjoy this patronizing approach. I mean, even when it was in government, that's what you want. People should feel that you can solve their problems, and if it comes to an election, it's good, because they should be beholden to government,
Angela.
even if you are not going to. But we need to be much more honest. I know there are times when the president recognizes that there are serious weaknesses. Almost most of his speeches, he attacks government officials for not doing their work, but he needs to take the bold step to move from getting money out of the hands of people he has attacked over and over to people who can actually do work. And they may not be government people.
Thank you. Angelo, yes, this question which I think we should run across the table.
Yeah, I wanted to take Moses Kisa. Of course, his question is, how can you have a prudent budget, because budgets are political, if you have a broken political system? But it's a leading question, because I think he's made up his mind.
Yes.
That this broken political system cannot do a prudent budget. But the theoretical question is, yes, you can have a prudent budget with a broken political system if, in fact, the budget is meant to fix the problems of that system. See, governments fundamentally intend good, okay? And where you are elected into office and your country has got many problems, like here we have a huge unemployment problem, to go from this number of jobs to so many jobs, that is political capital you're gaining. So you must assume that the government that is in power wants to solve problems, because their basis of remaining in charge and retaining public confidence is solving those problems. But he's a political scientist, and he knows that there is no real answer to how development happens. That is why, Tana, just wait a second, you go right across in Rwanda. Academics like him will call that the developmental state. Unlike Ona's very private sector worldview, in Rwanda, the state is considered more efficient than most companies. The state is the engine that drives the economy, and it works. It's taken that country with with the efficiencies of the state, to where it is now. So we know that this is possible. In Uganda's case,
it works for who?
Well, that's a different question. But the point is that
the point that it works.
Yeah, the point is that the state as a technology for growing is still the most reliable technology. I don't think it's the private sector. I believe it's regulation is important, but if our state got its act together, it can basically get the same results.
Maybe just a quick one. Can it?
I think it can, but I don't know whether it will be under this current system.
Give more time.
Give it more time.
Just hold it a moment. Let Nixon come in.
I think there's a question that is government still really relevant.
Sanjay will defend his colleagues.
I strongly still state that governments are still relevant.
I agree with you entirely.
And the fact, there are conditions that must be there for government to be relevant. One is that it must provide space for the people to hold it accountable. Even the budgeting process must be a process that actually builds, in terms of our theory, by the way, it's right in Uganda, that it starts with the people, it starts at the parish level. You know, whether that is really true is another thing. But if that was true, then these priorities we are talking about would be reflecting the aspirations of people. Secondly, the accountability of budget itself.
Nixon, just hold it a moment there.
Yes, please.
We are not theorizing.
Yes.
We're discussing things we know. A government we've lived with for 31 years. One of the major challenges I find with this particular government and why the budgets don't seem to work is it's not timed by the limits of when a government runs a cycle. It's just one continuous process. Unlike Kenya is going to an election next in August. Therefore, the budgeting and the talk and the projects that the government is implementing must reflect that there is an important election coming up next, and people are going to audit it or reward it depending on how it has performed. If you see where the governments know that you have a cycle, either 5 years or 4 years, they will tend to act differently within those periods. Even the budget would reflect that. Ours is continuous. So if something is not done now, it can be done next year. It can be done the other year or the other year.
But we have an election.
That does not remove away the relevance of government.
No.
You see, Charles,
you are missing.
No, for me, I think the next issue why government is relevant, Charles,
Yes.
is that
I
government
take
collects
objection.
from the citizens.
Where am I former?
You see where the derivation
But that's,
of why government must do
Yes.
this.
You make that point.
Government.
Charles.
Yes.
Charles, why am I a former
Yeah.
MP?
No, first wait. You
Why am
asked
I
earlier.
former?
No,
If
Charles,
it
can
was
I answer this?
continuous, why am I former?
Can I answer this?
Yeah, because you are being present or former doesn't affect the continuity.
No, but you see, Charles, you asked how we were going to finance this budget. Bigger proportion of this budget comes from the citizens. They are going to pay tax.
Yes.
Now, if they are
Do
going to
they?
pay tax, yes,
Really?
we pay a lot of tax.
No, they
No,
abolished
listen.
poll tax.
No.
They
Poll
abolished.
tax. When was that? When was poll tax?
Graduated tax, poll
Honorable
tax, everything
Tana,
has been waived.
Can I, when
So
you
we-
were
we-
talking,
we-
I did not stop you. Could I first say this? You see, the reason why government must be held accountable is because it finances this budget majorly from the tax. And it comes from citizens. And citizens must hold it accountable. But if we pass it over to the private sector, whom we do not necessarily hold accountable, then we must have a very strong reason for doing that. And I know there are certain things that can be done by private sector, but not everything.
Okay.
We also know of governments that are now also under capture by some strong private sector.
But someone would
In-
argue
in-
that
in
the
certain
Ugandan
areas.
government is largely privatized.
Yes, but
Or
we
personalized.
also know that governments like the UK that
It's a
promoted
private
with
enterprise.
the US privatization, they have kept certain very essential services still delivered by. The reason why the transport system in London is very efficient is not because it is in the private hands.
It is
So-
in the private hands.
No, please.
Yes.
I am telling
The
you.
underground
let's
train
not- let's
system
not
is run
deceive
by Virgin
and
Virgin Atlantic on one of the Ninis. The other one is REC. The Eurorail is a private company, run by a private company. The ferries at Calais, the port between France and UK, are run by a private company. The roads on the road toll system are run by private companies. Most of the
including
infrastructure.
BA is run privately.
Yes.
So the
Largely
point
private.
is,
Even British Airways is
can
run by a
own,
private company.
but it should never run.
Okay, let me take a message
It
from.
can own, but it should not
Let
run.
me take a
But
message.
Charles, you are not allowed
Yes,
to
I'm
use
coming
that
to you.
particular-
I'm coming to you in a moment. We still have some time. Wafulo Guto is watching the show, and he says Uganda's national budget is a boring annual ritual, which is hardly implemented or monitored. And the biggest abuser of that budget is the state's chief executive officer himself. Jose Nuamine is also watching us, and he says, to me, the poor performance of our economy is largely because of wasteful expenditure, massive capital flight, our dependence on nature, and partly donors. We must work around the clock to make this economy less of an appendage of outside economies. We must ensure self-sufficiency. Also, the inequality in salary remuneration must be addressed because it widens the income inequality gap and purchasing power parity gap. Now, the question is, if we know this is the reality, what we have been laboring with, all these discussions about the budget, and including this show, those who discuss the budget before and those who will discuss it afterwards, the question is, why don't these things seem to work? We know what we need to do, how we need to do it, we never get it done. So we'll sit through another ritual, budget will be presented and people will clap, 70% of your former colleagues and other important people in the government will be sleeping through the budget presentation, but then after that, we'll move on. You have your time now, Sam.
Charles,
Yes.
I will first take the first question first. Can, like Angelo said, the fellow has made his own judgment and declared it that it's a broken step.
It is a broken political system.
Yes, that's your opinion.
It's a fact.
But no, it isn't a fact. You may see the glass half empty. I am seeing it half full.
That is still a fact.
Yeah, it's okay.
That's not complete, actually.
It's
broken.
okay, it's okay. So, in my own opinion, Charles, I want to look at it this way. And you know that has been the way I look at things. What have we been able to achieve thus far? And in my own opinion, we have achieved a lot.
No. It doesn't matter how much.
You
said, what have we been able to achieve?
Exactly.
Articulate what we have been able to achieve.
Exactly. No, we are talking about the budget.
Yes.
Okay? When, to the best of my knowledge, and what I have been able to read, is that when the NRM came to power, it was NRA then, 1986. We didn't have water in the taps, we didn't have power, we didn't have roads. It used to take us 8 hours to drive from here to Tororo. There was no fuel. You had to queue for fuel. You had to queue for sugar. You had to queue for soap. You had to queue for milk. Everything was not available.
The country had been at war.
Yes. It had been run down.
How long ago?
No, it had been at war.
No.
How long ago is that?
30 years ago.
30 years ago.
Yes.
So if
No.
you
You asked a question. You are not allowing me to build my point. So in my own opinion, we've been able to move from that state where we used to take Kenyan beer. Okay?
Congolese beer.
Factories were set up at border spots to serve Ugandan market, where now today tables have turned where Uganda is now an exporter of many of these items, beer, sugar, soda, etc. Now, we have done a lot of things right, but we are not yet where we would want to be, like you have said. So in my own opinion, to answer his question, can we deliver? Yes, we can deliver. Like you have said in your remark to my second question, the second question you laid. We know the problems. We know the people who are letting us down. For example, I remember when I was in my first term in Parliament, we were crying about power shortage. Now, the Angelo Izama group is telling us, stop building these dams, they are not necessary.
No. There's actually excess.
He's saying delay them. He's saying delay them.
That's the regulator is saying.
Yeah. No, that's what I'm saying. Those regulators are serving somebody's interest, in my own opinion. If you lived through Uganda during that power shortage, and you calculated the net loss that running a factory on a generator or running this studio on a generator cost the company, then nobody in a sane state of mind would even recommend that. It's rather we manufacture, we get the power and export it. So, in my own opinion, we are fighting many forces at the same time. So, I want to say...
And we're blaming everyone else apart from ourselves.
No, we have wrongs. We do.
Yes.
I've said so. And I've even been specific. For example, what Nixon here has been saying, in my own opinion, government doesn't need to get involved at this stage now in building roads and other infrastructure projects. We can do BOT. That's the model that many of the other countries are using now. You give them the contract, let them build after 10 or 15 years, like we have done for this state-of-the-art hospital. The Italians will run it for 10 years, they give it back to us. My point is that government needs to focus, and I am on the Hansard for this, Charles. As a businessman, I've been brought up from childhood doing business. And you said, what is my opinion? I think government...
You said what budget works for a businessman like you?
Yes. I have been taught, and Honor will support me, in any business, you look at your income streams. In such a time, you increase your income, reduce your expenditure, so that you become robust. The government is not spending on tourism. Tourism is what brings us money. The government is not spending on trade. Trade is what is bringing us money. Agriculture, they are cutting. And that is what brings us the money. So you're not putting the money where we are supposed to be generating income.
What is it spending on?
It is spending on
helicopter for this.
On expenditure like health, like roads, like power. That, like he said, it is long term. But and we are not so in my own opinion.
Honorable, you're being a politician. you don't want to admit that you have. I have pointed out the positives.
What is happening?
And I'm pointing out the negatives.
Okay.
I'm only being objective.
Burite Joseph is watching us and says, thanks for the show. Angelo, I really have a problem with the budget process itself. You realize from start to actual implementation, we actually spend half the financial year budgeting. Imagine if that human resource was focused somewhere else and left an autonomous, well-resourced budget office to run these things. There is a reason NRM budgets have delivered miserably on human development outcomes.
Actually, you know, in 2011, I pestered the then Prime Minister, Right Honorable Amama Mbabazi, because he had gone into that election and he had made a commitment to reorganize the civil service. And I think he had presented a cabinet paper that would reorganize the ministries, merge some of them, make the government much more efficient. It probably died a natural death because even unbeknownst to us at the time, it was viewed as an attempt to take control of the government for his own, political ambitions. But the government is too large, and he's right. Smart budgets right now, and I'm glad that Sanjay Tana did mention twice his Facebook page. The technology is there today for us to limit the pageantry and the pomp of this political process. Who does it serve? Why isn't the president giving us a short speech and allowing everyone to see the budget in its details in electronic form somewhere else? It's because the politicians are really, for them, the gallery is much more important than the factory floor. And that's just a fact.
One of the things that will be coming on board, one of additional expenditure that will be coming on board is, I think there's a number of districts that are coming up, beginning to function next month,
and
after the presentation of this budget.
Sub-counties,
town councils. Yes. Will be coming on board.
Every one of those is like a migrant for Keith Mahakanizi, for whom I have a lot of sympathy.
Blowing the cost of administration.
And reducing on
money available to deliver services.
You should invite
the population of Ugandans are increasing and the students.
Let me clarify that.
I feel
the
so
fact
sad
is
that people still believe that this something called delivering services really exists.
We're delivering.
No, I've been to a hospital. It's not just me. You can talk to anyone in government, a PAS, a minister, they talk like me in private.
They complain.
They also lament.
The permanent secretary and secretary of the treasury.
I think for me, I have no problem.
The
government as things is doing very well. Law and order.
Keith Mahakanizi has shared this story himself.
Let government maintain law and order. This economic delivery must go to people who are working for profit, like Sanjay Tana.
Yes, Keith Mahakan has shared this.
Whether I want them to build the road,
we can share it
whether
here.
I want them to fix the power line,
your cynicism is not misplaced. Keith has shared the story when he went to his home district and wanted to be checked for for pressure. I think his pressure went up, and he had not carried his own machine. So he walked into a hospital, and in Liantonde, walked around the government, the biggest government medical facility there. Walked around. One, there was no nurse or doctor to attend to him. When he finally located some nurse walking around and said, "Can you help me?" The machine was not working. There was no power, and he said, "What kind of country are we living in?"
That's Keith Mahakan.
And
yes,
and the size of the money.
His high blood pressure is probably caused because he was budgeting.
Yes, he was budgeting and couldn't.
I really feel sorry for Keith. I have another story to share about Mahakan.
And yet, by the way, people who are watching,
about
they want to hear what this budget is going to do in terms of service delivery. As we talk about these other mechanics and all that, to them it may not even make sense.
Nixon.
And yet Ona is saying, forget about it.
Nixon.
There's no service delivery anymore.
This is something that Action Aid can look into, because for years we have said that the government suffers from major these hierarchies. It's not organized to be efficient. That's why information, like Sanjay was saying, on like cross-border trade, details that ought to be available to the government are kind of disoriented. But the other week, I was having coffee with some friends, and one of them said, "By the way, Angelo,
Ugandan coffee?"
Yes, Ugandan coffee. Thankfully, he says, like, "Do you know, Angelo, this other friend of mine was asking me, he works in the ministry, that his permanent secretary would like one of us to broker a meeting with Keith Mahakan." Why is the PS of a ministry asking private citizens
to broker a meeting with another PS?
These are the power brokers. These are the ones we are saying. These are the Kampala boys who never allow money to reach the
it doesn't matter how efficiently you budget.
Yes.
You still need to go through those layers to be able to get.
I think one should not misunderstand that the failure of the public sector to deliver on budget commitment is due to the individuals necessarily. I think it's structural. The way the public sector is structured, my simple analysis, it doesn't have adequate pressure. There are no pressure points to make individuals deliver. It allows for individual
or relevance
decision.
were tapped out of them intentionally.
So I think the budget, the money should, I mean, if it is not working, as we generally tend to agree in many respects, and not only us, why don't we change the strategy? That's all I'm saying. If the Minister of Health is having such problems, and you're having doctors who are well trained, who are basically not motivated, those nurses are not motivated, why don't you change the way this money is allocated to make them motivated?
Why is the strategy not changed, and who would the change benefit? Maybe that's the question we need to answer. Our time is out. We need to get out of here.
Who would fund that?
Let me just mention. I should have mentioned this at the beginning of the beginning of the show. We did have a discussion, and everybody was involved. Many people, many Ugandans, emphasized and walked the journey with this young Ugandan called Karo Ateirwe. You remember the girl, the cancer victim? Yeah. She succumbed to. She lost the battle to cancer in India, and because we did try, I think at that time, to try to mobilize the public to support her, and that public mobilization, because the health system is dysfunctional, was able to keep her going for at least an extra to almost 12 months. Yeah, more than 12 months that Caro managed to live, but she succumbed, I think, 2 days ago. Yes, about 2 days ago. I understand that her body will be returned to the country tomorrow at 2 o'clock, and then there will be a funeral service. No, the body arrives, there will be a funeral service at All Saints Nakasero on Tuesday at 10 a.m. And then I think the body will be taken to Uganda, where she will her final resting place. And when you have a discussion, we had a discussion, I remember, Ona, about some of those things. We had one of our former colleagues here who succumbed. Then you have all these private fundraisers, car washes, and people are debating and saying, should the citizenry be involved in mobilizing resources for that, or should the citizenry be involved in putting pressure on government to make sure that the healthcare system is more efficient? And the question was being raised about terminal illness, where someone is certain you've hit the road of no return, that where should the effort be? But in some other places you have palliative care, you have things that will make hospice, things that will make life easier even when you know it's going to be terminal. Do we see that in the budgeting? Where is the place of things like that? Do you see that now, yes, you open a hospital on Entebbe Road, and people asking questions even before the first brick is put into the ground. I don't know if this country has become too cynical and where this cynicism will take us. But gentlemen, our time is out. We need to get out of here. Watch where the budget will be going. I don't know for business people if they will be looking out for what opportunities this budget presents. Working class people, if looking out for opportunities or how it will impact their lives. But in the morning show on NTV and other subsequent discussions here, and the news the news segments, we'll keep bringing updates on the budget, the details, the breakdown, what money has been put where, what taxes are coming up, what tightening is being done, if any at all. I don't see that, but we'll continue the discussion. Our time is out. We need to get out of here. So thank you very much. Onapito Ekomloit, Corporate Affairs Director of Nile Breweries AB InBev, Angelo Izama, Sanjay Tana, and Henry Nixon Ogwal. Thank you very much to you all, our viewers, for joining us tonight, especially those of you who sent feedback, and each one who watched. Apologies, we did not take phone calls. We should have taken phone calls, but we will try to take phone calls in the next show on Sunday. From me, it's a good night.